Hi, everybody. Eimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. This is Fireside Chat 179, and apologies for the errors in the last attempt at broadcasting. But I'm going to start all over again, and I'll start again with my prayer for peace. Gomara Shiakon or Fud na Crinne, Gomara Shiakon in our Jaili agus in our Jirha, Gonari Lin Lenar Kujgarmaka, Gomich Buikas Jeev Jeachivdaka is Spirit Wifdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities, for peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. For those who make riches from violence and war, might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb. That our swords be beaten into ploughshares and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So, there's more people here, more people on YouTube. So let me see where you're all from. Hi, Sean, from sunburnt greetings from Calgary, Alberta. I'm from Gisborne, New Zealand. Ferdiad, you're back. Great. New Jersey. Where else? Scotland, lovely. Wyoming. Sunny Berlin. Beautiful. Anyway, I am here in High River in near Calgary in Alberta, Canada, and it is beautiful and sunny outside. And I'm here in Canada because we had our OBOD gathering, our camp last weekend, and a beautiful site. And my guest today, well, I have two guests. We've Jane, it's here sitting beside me because she's my host. Come in here, and then Janina Skutla Karlstad. Janina, you're very, very welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
So now tell our guests where you're from, or where you are actually.
I'm on a little hobby farm in central Alberta, Canada, originally from Edmonton, and have lived up in the Peace River country. We call it the Peace River country because it's a huge watershed area, its own little country within our province. And lived up there for a number of years until I fell in love with this valley, and here I am down in central Alberta with a little farm.
Can you do a land acknowledgement?
Can you do a land acknowledgement?
Oh, gosh, I can do. Just the drop that. So we are honored to live, travel, learn, and breathe in the air of the Treaty 6 land, the home of the Dene, Soro, Nehiao, Nitsitapi, and Stoney people, as well as the Métis Nation of Alberta, peoples who have walked this land and traveled and shared the knowledge and continue to share the knowledge going forward, time immemorial.
And Eimear and I are on Treaty 7 land, the home of the Blackfoot, Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda, Bears Paw, Chiniki, and Métis Nation 3. I think it's changed possibly 5 and 6, but we're on Treaty 7.
Okay, beautiful. So, Janina, unfortunately, I had set up all the photographs in the last broadcast, but for some reason, YouTube didn't kick in, even though I had set it up. So I don't have photographs. So you're going to tell us about you call it a hobby farm. So what's a hobby farm as opposed to, I don't know, a real farm, but it is a farm. Go on, tell me.
I actually don't know the definition of exactly what that is, but what I'm assuming is I'm on about 6.36 acres of land, and we have come into this out of interests. We don't make money off of it. We have all sorts of livestock, but we don't really, it's not our business. So being that it's so tiny, I guess it's just regarded as more of a hobby than a business pursuit. and being, we don't sell our livestock essentially, other than trying to move some off for pasture if we run out of pasture, and that we're not making a business of it. I guess that's what it is.
Okay,
We're
and so
surrounded by. Go ahead.
yeah, because we were there at your farm for our OBOD gathering last weekend, and what a welcome we had! It was just amazing, and weather was good, even though we had little bits of rain. But just describe, because you have your Soay sheep and you have your fish, and so just describe what your farm is. And I suppose because you spoke to me with such passion last weekend about your farm and your land and how wedded you are to it, and you were so excited, and I'm so animated about it. So I would like you to share that with our viewers.
Shall I start at the beginning, how it all sort of shaped?
Sure.
I guess. Yeah. So just starting at buying this property, I've been an educator, a teacher in the public school system in Alberta for about 35 years. And my partner is from down here and actually built the house and prepared the land and so on, which at the time that he started his house was much bigger. It was about a quarter section, and he had hay on it, he ran sheep on it, and they ran a fish farm, a trout hatchery. And so he was in the oil patch, and his family was raised here, and they grew up in this whole area. It happens, moving on. We've separated from our others and have become a partnership. And when I came down, he had been ill, and he and his former wife were having to sell the property. And I came down, and the mourning doves were cooing and the toads were singing, and it's June and just like incredible paradise like now. And this property was for sale. And sadly, my mom had passed away about the year before, but we had her properties that we'd had to sell, my sister and I. And in the selling of that, I was able to put a payment on this property, not realizing what I was going to get into. I just loved it. I just loved the valley. It was beautiful. It was green. With the fish hatchery, there were ponds that were involved with it. So, I mean, you're looking out on water, and when does that happen? So, and this beautiful valley, because when he had been looking at developing it, some of it as a subdivision, a certain amount of that land had to be put aside as environmental reserve. So you're looking at all these willows and tamarack or larch and black spruce and all of these things emerging. It's just this beautiful green landscape. So I just loved it. And over the next year, there was COVID and all the rest of it. And eventually I had wound up retiring then in 2021. And I bought this place, and I wanted Icelandic chickens. So we knew this lady who had Icelandic chickens, and we went up to ask her about them. Well, she showed us her lovely chickens, and there was more about them later. But she had these incredible sheep, and they were tiny, deer-like, rich mahogany colors, and crazy as all get out, because they get scared and woof, they all take off like a bunch of dancers roaring off through the northern lights in a way. And they were called Soay sheep, Soay. And there's this minute little sheep from, I forgot to look up whether it's 8 kilometers, 80 miles, anyway, many kilometers west of the Outer Hebrides. And they lived on this windswept island for centuries, literally. And nobody really knows how long they've been there. We think, since the Bronze Age. And they were there when the Norse settlers, the Vikings, were going by in the 9th century. And they named it Soay, which meant island of sheep, or sheep island, because there were these sheep eating up the kelp and the mosses and the winds. It was just a windswept, wild, cold island. And then the Romans got into the area too, and no one knew what these sheep were about. So anyway, people from this place called St. Kilda had a history of going over to the island of Soay, which is kind of redundant, sort of sheep island sheep. Anyway, and they would gather the wool from these sheep because they shed their own fleece and they're just a hardy animal. So they would take their dogs and get off the boat, go onto this island, gather the fleece, come back in about a week and take all of this fleece and push it up into the sheds of their houses on St. Kilda and save that. And then the children in November, when the rain started, would start to take out the vegetation out of the fleece and they'd clean it. And then their parents would start weaving and spinning, weaving and knitting for underwear in this. We were just fascinated with this story. And I've never had large livestock like that. So we all fell in love with it. And my friend Beulah just loved the story too. And we thought, we need to share this story. We need to preserve these ancient sheep. There's some of the original genotype, shall we say, of many of the sheep that we see these days. So, of course, we went fencing like crazy, which was okay because we had a dog and it was good to keep him in, and that was all good. Didn't get any Icelandic chickens. Then we came back that fall with 11 ewes and their lambs, and 3 little fellows. One was a ram, and they're able to breed at 4 months old. So we had this little ram named Angus, and he was a lamb, and then we let him out of the pen December 15th, which is about the time you let the rams in, and they're on a wild cycle too, which is fascinating because again, they're very feral sheep. So I kind of liked this tame but not tame sort of thing. So we let this little fellow out, and he just in 15 seconds was a little lamb and a ram. Just bang. He was just so excited, all these girlfriends. So we had a great group of lambs the next year, and it was just fascinating. And they looked like little fawns. They were just so tiny. Well, then we, just on from there, we went and we got the chickens finally and brought them up. And got to know them really well. It took a while before they started laying. And then we got some ducks that same year. And so it kind of, they're lovely. I really believe everybody needs to have a duck because they're happy and cheerful and humorous and they chatter away. So by this time we had a few chickens, a few ducks, and a nice little flock of sheep building up. Well, then we got a special guardian dog because there's a lot of kids around here. We're fully in agricultural land all around us, but there's coyotes. We saw a big, beautiful lynx here the one time. There are bears and so on. And so it was important to fence everything in, have the guardian dog, and take steps to make sure that our sheep are going to be protected. And then it became the thing to find out how we would use the fleece. So it's been a really interesting thing because I'm a kiddo from Edmonton. I've always loved farming. I've enjoyed visiting farms, but I've never done it. I always missed that bit. Everybody had my grandparents had sold off their animals, or people weren't on the land anymore by the time I arrived in the world, and we're full on. So wow. I guess you say it's a hobby, but it's a passion.
A full-time hobby, and you. So you also have, you're very interesting because you're a member of OBOD, but you also have a strong Norwegian, Norse passion connection, and how you weaved. I suppose, how did you find OBOD, or how did you find Druidry?
So this was interesting. Yeah. So I've been interested in my Norse heritage forever, but I'm also, I guess as my mom always said, a pot of soup. Canadian, we're born on Indigenous lands, but I'm half Norwegian and Irish, Scottish, a little bit of English, a little bit of Anishinaabe, a little bit of French, and so that's why she calls us the pot of soup. It's because all of these things, for our family anyway, have come into play. Lots of individuals find that they don't really need to know their background, and some of us want to know because you feel things pulling at you, and speaking to you and so on. So when I was in Norway, we I'm playing my flute later. I'm not going to look at that anymore. Anyway, when we were in Norway, I'd always connected with my grandparents. They were immigrants from Norway. So I was able to learn a little bit from them about our Norwegian heritage, but they were extremely busy, as were most immigrants from there at that time, becoming Canadian. And grandma was from Eastern Norway and grandpa was from Western Norway. Those are two different dialects. So I had to go to university to learn Norwegian. And at this point in time, I'm, I think, the only Norwegian speaker in our family in Canada. And really hoping that everyone else will continue some of it. And so it's important to me all my life to go back to Norway and find out more about it. And when I was there, I was on a farm and I loved that. And checking all the different, every aspect, the trees, the stones, everything. Learned a lot about it. Always interested in Viking heritage. And so when we were over there, a number of times, I went in 2015, 16, 17, 18 to these different places. I would visit stone circles. And we, my partner John and I are Viking reenactors as well. And we went to some ancient villages. One is Bora, down south of Oslo. And there's big hills that are there where there are graves. So there's a pilgrimage up into those hills to actually connect with the ancestors. And we went to different places, Gudvangen, which is just north of where my grandfather grew up by about an hour. So you're connecting with the land where he grew up and where grandma grew up, and yet all these fjords and these waterfalls, and it just like just this return to your ancestral lands and the inspiration. And hearing that land and seeing it speak, seeing the faces and the mountains and hearing the different musics coming from there and meeting some of the musicians, it all became a huge inspiration. And I came back thinking, well, I would really like to make a Viking ceremonial area out in front of my lawn. And a friend of ours, Ekti Margaret Cardinal, she's a family friend from Saddle Lake First Nation, also in Treaty 6. She had this idea that we should put together a labyrinth. And I hadn't ever been in too many labyrinths, but had been in Indigenous retreats, women's retreats with her, as she held in the past. And so she really introduced us to what she thought would be a good idea for us to create on this land. When I looked at putting it in the front yard at that time, it wasn't where I wanted to put it. It just didn't feel right. And then when we looked at putting it, then we looked at putting a Viking thing out there, sort of like a big ship, shape in the stones. It didn't feel right either. And this man, a friend of ours, an older farmer in the area, like 2 kilometers away, gifted us with some rocks. He had too many giant rocks. And he said, "Do you guys want them?" And we were like, "Yes." So he had this big machine, and we had a vision of starting a stone circle then. And I had been to the Drombeg one and some different ones up in Kerry. And by that time, we'd gone up to the ones in the Orkneys, and just tremendous. Loved them. So we said, well, we're going to make a stone circle. And we gathered these rocks, and our friend helped us load them on. We had 2 trailer loads we brought home and dumped them in the front yard. And then, well, now what? So we have to move them. We have to embed them, get them in the ground. Well, wouldn't you know, next door, who is working on a septic field and so on, helping some new neighbors who had bought property. And we said to him, would you like to help us with a project? And he says, well, what's that? And we said, well, we're making a stone circle. And he says, yes, absolutely. So he brought his machinery over, and as it happened, he had been to scads of stone circles all over Europe, he and his wife, and they'd had just a tremendous passion for them. So he was very taken up with sort of the symmetry and certain placement of the rocks astronomically. And it was fascinating working with them on it. And I was kind of working more on the shapes and the characters and so on. And each of the rocks was so different, and they still are. You know, one has a big mineral streak that comes through it. Several have fossils in them. And they're all sandstone from the Paskapoo Formation, which have gently held space for the waters down in the aquifers there. So they're standing up rocks now, and I'm not sure how it's going to go in the long run, because they're not used to standing up, but they've done well. And so here we have this beautiful, the standing stones of Eimear, as we call them. And then we wound up, and maybe we'll chat about the healing forest a bit later on, building the labyrinth out in the forest to the north. So both of these beautiful spaces within the valley, which was the sacred space already, with the waters and the trout pond, which we didn't mention, we have a lot of trout as well and some bees. So it's that, with all of the wild things all around us, is a very active, lively space.
Well, it certainly is. And I'm going to move on to Jane in a minute. But it was just lovely because we had our opening and closing circles ceremonies within your stone circle, which was absolutely beautiful. It's just incredible to have that beautiful space and scenery and your passion. So now Jane, she's been a guest before, and she has critters. She's another animal enthusiast, and it just fascinates me in a climate like this, where you have 3 months of sunshine and the rest is all snow, which I've only discovered recently, how you crazy people can have animals that you have to take care of in minus 40 degrees. So Jane.
Yeah, and there was I humping hay just half an hour before the broadcast. It's hard, and I mean, Janina's landscape is very different to mine. Mine's much more of land that has been turned to agriculture all around me, farmers' fields, and sort of where the foothills of the mountains meet the prairies. So it's very flat here. Where Janina is in a beautiful lush valley. You know, I quite envious of all the trees and the lushness. Sort of every tree where I am has been planted. You know, it's not natural. Well, though a few little poplars have sort of self-seeded themselves, but it takes determination to really look after the animals here. Like Janina said, I remember on Marcus's talk, you know, he talked about his goats just free roaming. They wouldn't last 10 minutes free roaming here because the coyotes would have them.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you there. His free roaming were all 30 out of 31 were attacked by wolves, and there are no more. So much for free roaming.
So it's definitely harder to do anything here with coyotes. And I know when we were at Janina's for camp, we could hear the coyotes howling at night too. So fencing is a thing. Really just being conscious of making sure you've got their needs met, you know, water in the winter with water systems that can stand the cold weather, good fencing, hay, and other sort of supplemental feed things, and then just a lot of determination to keep going out in, you know, on the very, very cold days to make sure everyone's okay. But the animals seem to fare pretty good. We've never lost anyone due to the cold, especially the sheep. The donkeys are my donkeys are a little bit softer in the cold, but the sheep are so floofy by the time winter comes there. Yeah. They're well insulated.
You have one horse, you have 2 donkeys, and
3 goats.
3 goats,
5 sheep.
5 sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I used to have more horses, but they've aged out and passed on now. But yeah.
Wonderful. So not only, I think now is the time for a bit of music. Janina is an amazing musician. She is a savaldonic when it comes to particularly blowing instruments, and I got a great chance at the end of the camp. Thank you. And I got to make a flute, because I always say I'm not a blower, I'm a plucker. So I have been playing with it a little bit, and it sounds a little bit like somebody learning to play the violin, a lot of screeching and misplaced notes. Where the harp is easy, you pluck a string and it sounds lovely. So blowing instruments is a real challenge. It takes skill with your fingers and skill, not to mention with your breath and how you use your mouth and all of that. So How about actually, play as a piece, but also before that, to talk about your instruments, because you have, I don't know, what do you call a collection of instruments?
Oh, she has a whole orchestra in the
Yeah.
basement, really.
A collection. Just a collection, I suppose. Well, my
It doesn't
partner
do it
John
justice.
is a guitarist.
You have the lyre, guitars, drums, percussion instruments, everything.
So you can start.
It's been a wonderful journey. Okay, well, so we have a lot of different guitars and string instruments, and John tends to specialize with that, although I have done that certainly in teaching music and working with the string instruments over the years. But I was introduced probably about 15 years ago to the indigenous style flute, not particularly the actual. No, Sean does not need to convert. I am going to, in fact, have the flute happening. You'll have to read the comments. So I've got quite a collection of world flutes, and I'm a world flute instructor with the World Flute Society, which heads out of the US. And we have a grand group of people, a hugely inclusive group of people with all kinds of flutes from all over the world: flute makers, flute vendors, flute players, flute instructors. And I'm very privileged to be a part of that. The indigenous style flute was what introduced me to it, and I've moved on into the whole music world because of them. It's always been said to me that the flute comes to you at the time you need to have it come to your life. And I really found that's true. I went from not being able to play or sing Happy Birthday all that well as a teacher to being a music specialist in the classroom, and it's been my honor to teach many children the flutes and the drums and the classic instruments like the ukuleles and guitars and so on. But the soundscape instruments have been the amazing thing. So I'm going to start I just have a few. I'm not sure how to write this, but here is a moose bone flute, elgbane, we would call it in Norwegian. And I hope that you can hear it. This one I've called Magnus. No relation to my cat, who is also named Magnus, but it was a good solid Norwegian name, and it seemed to suit the flute. So if it plays well and you have a chance, just close your eyes and imagine these beautiful and amazing animals stepping into the forest. I'll just play that a little bit. Were you able to hear it?
Beautiful.
Could you
Play
hear
it
it?
again. Play some more. It's beautiful.
Isn't it incredible? Moose,
Absolutely.
the musician Moose.
It's beautiful.
I hope you could hear it.
That sound is both soothing and haunting. And I mean, I use the word haunting in a very magical way. And when you played that for us live, it was just beautiful. And Honora says, what a lovely tone it has. Gabriella says, I know that song, wonderful. So lots of feedback. So play another piece on another instrument and tell us. Beautiful.
So this one was a branch floating on the Missouri River, and there was a group of flute makers called the Fallen Branch flute makers. So this fellow found this, and it looks like something out of the Lord of the Rings, like, it was a little root. So with these flutes, there is a bird that sits on the roost. You could call it a fipple, you could call it a totem, all these kinds of things. And then you have all of these beautiful, he had designed this one for me. And then because there's no whole end, it has this incredible artwork hear where the sound comes out. So this is just a really neat. So I have several branch flutes, which is where the original of the indigenous flutes would have come from long ago. And so what I have are generally indigenous style flutes because they've not been made by indigenous people, although some have. And so it's just politically correct to say indigenous style or made in the style of the indigenous flutes. So that's that one. And I always teach my students, never lose the bird. No bird, no song, which makes sense when you think about it. So I'll just show you a couple of other ones that are bird head flutes. And bird head flutes are very traditional in some groups. These are made by Stephen Rensinker of Makwa Flutes in Ontario. And Stephen started his journey making flutes about a little bit later than me in playing them. And he has excelled in creating the birds. So this one's Valkyrie, because the trumpeter swan is also involved with the Norse mythologies, or the swans are, not the trumpeter. And we have a swan festival here that because the trumpeters were endangered, and I'd asked him, Steve, I need a flute to signal and tribute the trumpeter swans. So he did a biologically accurate one. And I love this flute. It's made out of yellow cedar. And it's just a really crisp, beautiful sound. And so since then, it's also become a big part of my story, persona with the Vikings, the music I play as the Valkyrie as well. The Valkyries were, of course, the maidens who picked up some of the warriors and carried them to Valhalla. But it's sometimes been symbolized by the swans, too. And so this is one of my very, very cross-cultural flutes. So I'll play part of one of my first songs that I ever made up. Sometimes they download.
Janina, play a full tune on it. This is amazing. I mean, people are just loving this. So just play a tune. Oh, just beautiful. Comments like these are extraordinary, beautiful. How beautiful. Oh, I love swans. Absolutely beautiful.
Oh, me too.
Incredible.
I've traveled the world looking at swans and written a story about them. My soul flies with the swans, and I'll cry. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about swans. My mom used to say, no, you can't go yet. We need you here on this world. You cannot fly with the swans yet. Because I lift with them. You know, it's incredible. This one is a loon. Again, beautifully created by Stephen Rensink. And I was working in a park not far from here that is the provincial park. It's called Crimson Lake Provincial Park. And it, like my place, is an old growth forest. So in this wildfire time, there are fires waiting to happen, and it's you're thankful literally for every day that you have in these spaces, because those fires are wild, literally wild. And so when I worked there, I was just so honored, because it's a park that protects 5 different kinds of wetlands: the fens, the marsh, the anyway, lots of things. And so he made this flute for me, because we had 4 pairs of loons that were common loon nesting on that lake. And then he even went out and made it in the key of the loons, as they call, which is amazing. So that is just so neat. So I don't know if I can do that, if it'll come through or not. I just one part of their call. So of course I play other songs on it as well, because you can do all sorts of wonderful nature songs. And that's part of the story of these flutes, is their songs. The flute world is an amazing place. I've found flute people, much like druids, very inclusive, very amazing. And this one was a gift to me. A fellow in North Carolina whom I had never met sent this to me. I had never met him. I still have not met him. But he said he was so happy with the work that I was doing with the flutes and with the children that I was teaching. And he mailed it to me. And so this is it's just called the walnut. And it's got lepidolite embedded in it. And it's made by the Tree of Life flutes, who are down from the United States, Ed Doherty. It's one of his best flutes, I think. And it's got a beautiful warm sound. And they've always said to me, two ways to look at buying a flute is, one, if it makes that loon sound, then you know you're hitting some of your higher notes. They're very versatile, but they're not a Western civilization flute or orchestral sort of flute. So there's some accommodations have to be made to be doing some of Western society's music, shall we say. But they're in such a way that every note comes together, and you can improvise. And so to me, I'm going to try something today. I've never done this. We will see what happens. So there is written music. There's tablature for this. You can read the music, or you can do thoughts, or I do chicken scratch X's and O's. So songs are written down. I gave some to Eimear. You can play Greensleeves. You can play Silent Night. You can play different cowboy songs, country songs. You can play Middle Eastern songs, all kinds of things. But the best ones are the ones you play from the heart.
Yeah. And
playing from the heart is where you're looking around and you're essentially enveloping what you're seeing and what you're feeling. So I'm just seeing a little bit here. And so I'm going to try this, taking in your energies this afternoon, all of you, and being grateful for this time to share with you and learn from you. And Eimear for having me. And I'm going to play your song. I haven't done this before for you because I haven't met you all. So this is your song. And here we go. For you. Now, I hope that came through okay, because I heard some reverberation, so I don't know if it came through for you all right or not.
That was just beautiful. I'm going to pause our conversation. You know, I'm just thinking of the service you give or you make. Um, what a gift it is that you offer in terms of your flute playing, and obviously people are recognizing that and sending you flutes and making you flutes, and it's just wonderful. And both you and Jane, you come from a traditions of being of service. And of course, what's central to Druidry is how can we be of service? I'm going to ask Jane about what you do at work. I'm really fascinated. I went to her workplace, and I'm going to let her talk. And then I'm interested in you sharing if you're able to, and if you're happy to do it, what your parents did in terms of offering service to people and how your house was a safe house, if that's okay to talk about. If not, that's okay. But I think it'd be lovely
Yeah.
because it fits in very well with what you're doing now. That you know that thread from how your parents were to how you are and how you offer service in a different way. And I'm always fascinated with that. So people are just wonderful. That
Oh,
tone is so sweet, so amazing. Thank you for sharing. I love that. Thank you. This was lovely. It was magical. So I'm going to ask Jane because it's just being of service as druids is really, really important. So Jane, I'd like you to just talk about what you do.
Yeah, so I work in community disability services. So I work at an organisation that supports adults with developmental disabilities, sort of 80% of whom also have diagnosed mental health conditions as well. So they're dual diagnosed. So we try to create environments where individuals can thrive. So many of the young people come to us having been in children's services for most of their life, and they're not really quite ready or equipped to deal with the adult world, shall we say. And so we try to create environments where people can thrive and find a passion. So we help individuals explore different things in community, um, so that they can find their own passion and not be dependent on staff or workers to always be giving them and helping them meet their needs that way. And also, many folks who are able also give back in the community. They volunteer with the homeless shelter, with the food banks. So it's really we're helping individuals um, be the best version of themselves in many ways. Also, we support people through housing as well, helping them find housing situations where they can live in the community rather than institutions. And so that varies for different people how they'll sort of have the best housing situation for them. But being community engaged is the key part of what we do. Um, yeah, it's so hard because what we do is so varied. We support people from 18 years of age until the grave, literally. And so we have a youth program, we have a seniors program, we have a gender specific program. So we have a whole range of programs to meet people where they are and where they're at.
But what struck me, I was fascinated, is that you give your clients, for want of a better word,
Yeah.
an opportunity to also be of service. And
Yes.
that to me, I haven't come across that before.
Yeah.
It's like you provide a service to them, and then they are allowed an opportunity.
Yeah.
And because being of service gives us meaning in our lives, and
Yeah.
that's really, really important to keep the same.
Yeah, and that was really key to what we do. It's, you know, we the people we support, we don't see them as less than, and they're receiving our services because they're less than and we feel sorry for them. No, we're all the same. We just have different skills and different opportunities in life. So for us, it's really important to make sure individuals have the opportunity to find something that's really passionate for them. We have some really gifted musicians, we have some gifted writers and artists, but a great number, nearly everybody we support gives back into the community in one way or another, either through their artwork or doing gifts of community work, like say at the food bank, brown bagging it, which is taking meals out to children in schools whose family aren't able to feed them very well, either at lunchtime or breakfast. And so there's many ways the folks we support at work give back and are an integral part of their community. and sort of like we're making them essential parts of the community, and they're relied on by other organizations and seen as key members of the sometimes voluntary, sometimes paid workforce, alongside their peers. So there is none of this less than or more deserving than. Often people ask me what I do, and I say, "Oh, I work in disability." They say, "Oh, aren't you a saint?" No, I'm not a saint. I'm actually really quite a mean person. But it's not. It's just about ensuring everybody has the same opportunity to find their passion, and that's what gives me passion: helping others find their passion and find their purpose, and be able to be a part of community, and no one is better than anybody else.
I just find that fascinating. We all need to know that we matter and that we make some impact, however it is, be it just in our own homes, but that what I do is important, and that's what you're doing. And all jobs are important. We tend to, unfortunately, in the modern world, we pay the CEOs a lot of money, and we don't pay the people who do the normal things that we need. How do we keep our world clean? How do
The
we
hard
keep it
work.
safe? The hard
The
work.
hard work.
That if that fails, then we end up
Yeah.
with chaos.
Yeah.
So I just love it that what I do matters, and we all need to know that we
Yeah.
have that sense that what we do matters. Alicia, I hope I've pronounced your name properly. We need more models like that in the US. And Carl says I'd say the same, Jane. And then Lloyd says you sound like a saint to me.
Ah,
She's bordering on it. So looking at that and then weaving, Janina's experience, in the family in which you were brought up, Janina. I was just really intrigued by your family background. Would you like to share that?
I'm intrigued by it too. Thank you. I'm honored to have had a loving mom and dad, and to have known 3 out of 4 of my grandparents. I'm really appreciative of that, because I know there's many who have not. And I felt I know my 4th one through the stories that I've heard about him. And that's the O'Brien room, is dedicated to Grandpa Eddie, who was of Irish descent. So my great grandmother was Scottish. My great grandfather was English. He was a colonialist. He started several towns in Alberta. His name was Day, and he started Daysland, and his house is still there as far as I know. There's even a park, I guess, named after him. Never got to know him, but apparently I look a little bit like him. And my grandma married an Irish descendant, which was Grandpa Eddie. So we had Nana and Grandpa Eddie. And my grandparents on my dad's side were Norwegian immigrants, like I said, and they're pioneers. They settled in the area, all kinds of different things. So the lifestyle of a pioneer was very difficult. So there's always the sense of the land, buying the land, selling the land, settling the land, all kinds of different aspects of the land. Enter Oscar and Ina, my mom and dad. My dad was in the war, wound up with tuberculosis, and had to go into a job less than what, he was happy to be an accountant, but it wasn't what he started out to be. He had wanted to go into more photography, which wasn't a really great way of making a living at the time, but he always took pictures of there was a cat, of cats, of an onion against the winter snow. Dewdrops, all kinds of things. I shut mine out. Yeah, they all want to be part of the show. So anyway, he grew up on the land in front of the lake at Lake Wabman. And my mom grew up in Edmonton, where houses were for almost 100 years. And when my grandma and grandpa, where her mom and dad had settled there, it was just a little pathway in front where there were milk carts going. There was a pheasant farm remotely to the north and a mink farm remotely to the north, indigenous settlements around and about. And these 3 little brick houses built on this thoroughfare where the milk carts and the horse-drawn wagons went. And she loved the land. She stayed in that house until a few days before she passed, and a month before, 96 years old. So her sense of space and place was immortalized in all of the things she taught us about rewilding. And they were, I think, environmental pioneers, my mom and dad, before the time. They were rewilding before the time. They took us out to the land all the time, out to Elk Island Park, out to Waldman to see the grandparents. We would take my Nana whenever we could. She was very crafty. She was a fortune teller and a very good one. As were several others in the family over time, actually. And that's always fascinated me. It's not been something I've been given at this point, I don't think. But they were all very land-based. So when my mom, she got, so many things, lots of stories. So my Nana lived right next door to us. So we had her until we were in our 20s, which was amazing to know her, to have tea every day, to have stories. And we had a little rock outside her house that had a little pool in it where the fairies would be. We always kept it full of water for the fairies. And there was a little gold dish on a little bookcase. Whenever we walked across the alley to see her, there'd be candies in there from the fairies. And so we grew up with all of that sort of that magical sense. It was always underlying everything. And my parents had just a tremendous way of bringing the different seasons into a really magical way that we always, even as we grew up and there's always those kids that say, oh, Santa's not real or whatever. But we grew up knowing that the spirit of Christmas, or the spirit of these seasons, was real. It wasn't a lie to us in that way, because it was created with such a sense of love and so inclusive. So we carried on. We had cats, we had dogs, I had everything, tadpoles, it's just whatever. And they taught us to be really, really respectful. Just take care of everything. And whenever we went camping, my dad would just leave the campsite better than when he had found it. Kitty is really happy. Kitty's name needs to be on the front now beside yours, Jane. So anyway, it was tremendous. I'm so grateful to them for all that they shared. And we one time wound up going out to, they'd always taken us to a number of different cultural events. Chilean carnivals and fiestas and African night and heritage days, and had always included people. They'd both been through, the wartime, the recession, all of these kinds of things, times where everything had to be saved. They'd been through some times that we had not been, and so we didn't quite understand some of the philosophies some of the time. But they shared a love of music. They shared a love of the stories of our past. And so on my Nana's side, we found out about, Daysland and so on, and all of the family there. And that was really neat. On my grandma and grandpa's side, we found out all about Norway and about the farms and the people. And they reconnected me with my family, with whom I'm still in touch, and cousins, like sisters to me now. When I go over there, and it's just, and I speak Norwegian, not great, but enough to certainly to communicate and touch base with the land and find out what they're doing. And they're all very, with the farming or hunting or hiking or the activities that they have still stayed very land-based. So bringing that fast forward, we one time went to a rodeo, a really cool little rodeo. So some people like Eimear, you'll be going to the Stampede, which is a huge event, mind-boggling event. It's wonderful. It would be fun to take it in a little bit. I haven't been there since 1996, I think, and it's bigger than ever. But we went to a little rodeo on Enoch First Nation, and we got there, and my dad loved recording the different events and different music we went to. But we got there, it was too soon. And it wasn't open yet. So they sent us off to pick blueberries. I hadn't had wild blueberries before, but we spent a gorgeous afternoon filling buckets of blueberries. And this was tremendous. Well, then the rodeo started, a really wonderful time. And after the rodeo, a man came out with a drum. So for those of you who are abroad, not in Canada, Enoch First Nation, I believe, is a Cree nation. The River Cree resort is situated on that one now. It's very well known. And so this was an Indigenous drummer, and he led, I guess, what would essentially be a round dance now. But we danced around and around and around, and that heartbeat drum stayed in our hearts. That night we went home, we danced around and around, and we kept going. The next weekend we went out to Paul First Nation, which was close to my grandparents, and my grandfather had worked with some of the Paul First Nations people at times when he was a mayor in Waldman. And while he's just about left it there. Wound up meeting all these amazing people, Stony Nakota there. And it just went on from there. We met and wound up with a whole family of people that my mom and dad called their sonnies and their daughters. And at one point we felt like we had about 10 brothers as it felt. It was very much a big family. And there was so much joy. And some of our friends would stay at home and work on regalia and beadwork in the wintertime. Kara had to head off to school. We'd come back. We could hardly wait to come back. And people were sitting around having tea, sharing stories and laughs. There was drumming practice in the living room, people playing guitar at different times. And my mom and dad kept it as a very safe space. There were no drugs. There was no alcohol. In from the various nations around us, Onion Lake and Musquecheese and Enoch and Paul's and so on. They knew their teenagers, because we were all teenagers at that time, had a safe place to come. So we wound up very interconnected, and that became very much a culture, a society that my sister and I grew up with for a good half of our growing years into our 20s. And it's still very much a part of us because, again, very land-based. And then there's a lot of music that we learned in the songs and the drumming and so on. The flute was not around a lot at that time because the flutes, as well as a lot of the drum songs, had been taken underground with colonization. So for a while, post-contact, that music wasn't available but it is being celebrated so many times now. I mean, all over. And we're living and learning in a rich, vibrant culture across Canada. It's an honor to be in that. So it's a part of our lives that we still have very deeply inside us. We're grateful to the elders and our brothers and sisters that we have. Throughout, it's been an amazing journey, and that's led me into when we have a national initiative in Canada called the National Healing Forest Initiative, started by Peter Kroll, who is a geologist, and Patricia Sturbies, Cowessess First Nation lawyer. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report came out in 2015, and these two individuals, amongst a number of other people, were in Ottawa at that time. And they didn't know each other, but had come together to take a walk back to, I don't know where, but it was a long enough walk. They fell into step and they started having a talk and talked about how so many of the ills of our nation had to be healed, but within four walls and stark, barren buildings in a way compared to being outdoors. That there needed to be healing in nature. And they came upon this idea of having these healing forests, which since then spread out to Canada, having over 28 different national healing forests. And it isn't that they're national as in like a national park. It's not that kind of a designation. It's national as in healing the nation. And from residential school, 60 Scoop, murdered, missing Indigenous women and children and girls, LGBTQ plus, for working with everyone to help create healing. And the idea is that people from around the world, it doesn't matter what culture, what religion, what gender, that everyone heals best in nature when we are grounding. So one morning, and it was Earth Day, 2022. I woke up and the first thing on my phone was an email from a fellow called Jode Roberts. Didn't know the fellow. It was one of these things, a meant to happen kind of message. And it talked about the healing forests. And I phoned my friend Beulah, who has land here in the valley and a third interest in her sheep. And we get into all kinds of mischief. I said to her, we need to do this. And to me, it was not an option. This was dealing with ill and wounds and things that our extended family, my mom and my dad, my sister and I, that our extended family had experienced with different suicides and drug issues and assaults and things. We had not personally experienced that, but our extended family had, and we had ached and cried and mourned with everyone else. So when this option of looking at this healing forest came up, there was no option for me in terms of should I or shouldn't I. So she and I chatted about it and where could we get the money to buy land to do this. So I kind of dug into a little bit of my retirement there, a bit. And she did as well. And then John gave up his part of that land and we purchased that. And it is a healing forest within the National Healing Forest Initiative. And we received a grant that 1 year to help us with connecting with other forests, helping that one get started. And that wound up being the home of the labyrinth that our elder Actie Margaret Cardinal had mentioned and wanted in the first place. So the other night, when we had our camp and the Grove and other Druids met, we started in the Standing Stones, influenced with the instructions and the storylines from Scandinavia, Ireland, and Scotland. We started there and we wound up in the healing forest and instigated by our family friend from Saddle Lake First Nation. And we had a candlelight vigil walk to the labyrinth, the 7-walled classic labyrinth. And it was amazing. It was so quiet. And it's tamarack and black spruce and willows with lots of the usnea. Remember that our artist, yes, our friend Crystal had talked to, yes, yeah, some of the lichens and so on that are eaten by the caribou and whatnot. And so we were able to share and work with that and then come back and have a fireside chat. So that all came about from my mom, who was a nurse, my dad, who was an accountant, but very nice people with that sense of magic and wonder that they imparted, and my sister and I always. And now they are gone, but I feel so much they're with me in moving all through this land. Some of that comes from the energy of having their furniture and their interests and so on within this house. But a lot of it just, it's, I think, imbued now within Kara and I, and has, I mean, Kara has done many things. She's working on writing and books and gardening and sacred space. And I teach and involve people in music, and John and I do a lot of that kind of thing. But this has become more than that, and it's humbling. The weekend was huge for me, really still trying to unpack some of that and the feeling that people had. But once again, creating a safe space where you can ground and nurture each other and nurture yourself, healing in nature. So it is a healing forest for reconciliation, but its reconciliation is within oneself as well.
I think that is so beautiful.
That's where my parents have brought, and many other people have brought this today. Yeah. Yeah.
It's beautiful because both you and John are incredible hosts. And then your land is an incredible host. And
it is.
And it was beautiful just walking down with our little lanterns down the hill into the healing forest. And I came across wild strawberries on the way. And then what Janina hasn't mentioned, we were invited to pick a stone from a cairn that was outside the forest, to go in silence and then add a stone to the labyrinth as we walked. And it was just beautiful to find, well, where am I going to place my stone? Just beautiful. and all done in silence, and just listening to the sounds of nature around us was quite special. So your land is, and it's like you weave a beautiful dance or beautiful thread between what you do, the two of you, and Beulah, and all the other people that are adjacent to this, and how you co-create as something special. The land and you yourselves co-create something wonderful. So, and it's so druidic. And I just, how did you find Obod? How did you find Druidry, given that you've come, giving your background?
So, from this elderly, wiry, fiery farmer who gave us this beautiful 55 to 65 million year old sandstone, and Blair, the fellow who helped us put the circle together. One of my family members always used to spend a lot of time collecting rocks in his childhood. One of his greatest things was to be in a gravel pit looking for bits of rock and different things. And I just thought he might be interested when we put up these big rocks. And so I send him a picture and he says, "Are you becoming a druid or something?" And I looked at him and says, "Oh, I don't know." That's all he said. And I looked it up. And I mean, druids were untouchable to me. It was far back in the past. We had always, like, my mom loved Irish and Scottish music. Oh my gosh, the bagpipes made her cry. We had always liked the sounds of the drums. I'd always liked the dancing. I took Irish dancing. And of course, went with my dance teacher to see Lord of the Dance. And there were these big stones and the druids that had come out of it and the pixie that came up. So that's where I started my tin whistle that wound up taking me over into Ireland and working with the traditional musics there. All of that. And so there was kind of a mystical, magical thing. I was familiar with Welsh stories and Irish stories back from our childhood. It was part of our heritage. And so it was like, wow, is this a thing? And I looked it up and there were different druid groups. So I'm like, oh, wow, what is this about? And so I'm looking at a few of them. Obod was the one that came through the strongest, loud and clear. And I'm like, nature-based spirituality? What is this? This is tremendous. Like, this is who I am. And we have the trees and the land and the water and the sky. And all of this is huge. And so I thought about it for a few months. And then I signed up and started the course. And I'm not as far as I want to be. But so there's a lot I have to learn. But on the other hand, you come to this space with what you have learned and experienced. And so I ask the land lots of times if I'm in a real situation, not a real situation, but I want to know what next. And I ask the land and I ask the trees, and I'm always humbled by the fact that there is an answer. And so it became a really perfect mesh. And I found the Chinook Hills Grove by watching one of their, I think it was an equinox, spring equinox online. And I asked my mentor, "Where is this grove?" He said, "Calgary." I'm like, "What? That's 2 hours away." So because I thought I was going to be just on my own, how am I going to figure this out? I'll never get to, so anyway, yes, very blessed to have all these wonderful people around and just some tremendous new friends on many levels from the last weekend, and sharing things, and their thoughts have been mind-blowing to me, to us. Like I say, we're still processing, and in the meantime, our sheep are real, our fish. There was one of those things that we talked about, like Jane says, the elements, right? We had these amazing fish in the pond. Eimear and I had a sort of a great visit with the fish there on Thursday last week. And we had lost, John used to raise trout here and other kinds of tried Arctic char and various things. And they used to deliver trout. John's very connected to water. He's a canoeist, rapid shooter on the rivers, stuff that would scare me to bits. And he knows his fish and he knows his water. And we're very big part of the watershed societies and in a big thing saving water right now, recognizing that industry is important, but saving water that's being highly oversubscribed. And so anyway, we connect the water very deeply. And in the winter, we had about 60 or 70 beautiful big trout die because the air stone where we keep the aeration going in the last cold snap didn't work. And we didn't know. And he came back. They would come up in where he had created this hole from the air that did every week all winter long to keep our fish alive. And they didn't come. And he was just sick. And I was sick. And that is a life-changing thing, because they made so many people happy. And they were so in and around the people that visited. And people will text me and say, how are my fishies? You know, and they were gone. And they had been there and they were gone. And I mean, that is how life goes and the changing of it at times. But it was, to me, a huge change. And at that point, I stepped away from teaching. I'd been doing temporary contracts and so on. I said, no, I'm not. I'm going back to the farm. We are having lambs. We're going to have the lambs. We're going to rebuild these fish. We're going to rebuild our bees. The winters are changing. They're cold, they're hot at all the wrong times. You plant, there's the spring, and then it froze like a week and a half ago. And our lettuces are like this big. So it's really dealing with a changing climate. And we got 100 of these tiny little rainbow trout. So then we were working with our fish, trying to feed them and help them grow and become used to coming into people again, which also means used to coming into being eaten by herons and things. And that's not a great thing at times. Not when you, because it is a great thing in the ecosystem, but it's not a great thing when that is a closed ecosystem. You know, so that we are in a way responsible for infusing that oxygen in the winter and responsible for that death. When there becomes too much vegetation, it absorbs too much in the wintertime. So you have to monitor that. We're monitoring the predator, because a predator could come and it needs to eat, but then there's a whole fish population is gone within days. So it's a different and unique challenge in taking care of the waters, which we regard so sacred. We drink these waters, we swim in these waters, we water with these waters. And there's so much life that's based here, beavers and muskrats. And we've got Eimear, and Jane, there's a duck came out with 10 little ducklings last night in a little row going back and forth in the pond. It's just, you know, it's so exciting. And so it's a huge responsibility caring for the waters. And we need more and more people helping care for it. And so I don't know how I got into that with the fish, but anyway, that wound up being one of the things that
it just struck me when we were down feeding the fish. Yes, you know, you now are the protectors of this space, but really struck me about when people go and feed fish like that. So you were describing, you've got the rainbow trout and you've the brook trout, and you had that big rainbow trout called Shark, who swims this way and gets with a little dorsal fin and gets the water. But then the brook trout come up, open their mouths, and you see these teeth take the food and then turn down immediately. But watching those while we were chatting, it was almost like I now care for those fish. So when you actually see them and you watch how they play and how they interact and how two different kinds of trout behave in different ways in the same space, then it becomes more of an imperative. Oh my goodness, I have a relationship with these beings. I now have to take more care. And it's that bringing ourselves closer in line with nature because we're seeing it rather than hearing about it online or something else. Now, not everybody can have a fish pond. I understand that. I live beside a river, but I don't fish. I have no interest in fishing. I'm more interested in talking to them. Do you know that kind of thing? But it was just really, really struck me how what you're doing is, and when, you know, actually bringing these fish or these beings closer to us so that we actually have some other connection other than, I mean, I do eat fish, but there are things that are over there, but actually no. And watching how they interact and how they come for food
Yeah.
and how they play. I just was blown away by that.
Yeah. Seeing it all come together. And sometimes there's so many parallels, with people, like as we're watching the ewes taking care of the lambs. At the first, those lambs drove them nuts. It drove them batty, and they're like, come back, come back, come back. And they're like, flow off. But literally, in the early stages, they would like take them out on a run back and forth across the pasture 3 times. Then they go in the little climbing stones, and then they go and eat, because that's what, and it reminded me of phys ed classes, taking the kids out to the gym and all these kinds of things, It's been so interesting. There's so many parallels. And now with the baby squirrel that's arrived, and it's just a mini-me of the other squirrels, and it's just so amazing. And the things we learned about with Gail Nyoka and the water, and everybody's different views of water and taking care of it, and how much of a part of us it is, how we are affected by it. So it's this land has taught me so much in terms of how to interact with it and the responsibilities in teaching others and ourselves daily, to be aware for the signals, to be, and my mom and dad were so great about teaching us. They used to give us a nickel, I think it was, when we went into Jasper, into Banff, for the first of every big species of animal we would see. And we learned to like lean the horizon and watch for the elk and the deer and the bears and everything. And we still do that all the time. We were trained to, And so now it's something I still do. And when I'm trying to rescue a lamb from the fence, or, keep a bird from the dogs or something, it's all about the signals and reading the land. And I think with the Druidry, I look forward to learning a lot more about that in depth, relationship to the trees and the waters and that connection. I just think it's just going to enhance that even more.
Lovely. Do you have anything to add to that?
Only a little, again, as our environments are very different. We're sort of like 2.5, 3 hours apart, within the same province of Canada, but very different landscapes. Here, it's very open. I'm looking out the window and just fields and fields and fields, and a few trees that we've got planted. But I think also some of that harshness reminds me of kindness and to be grateful, because sometimes, particularly, in those cold months, which seem never ending at the time, it really sends me into myself to think about, what are my thoughts about myself, my kindness, my relationship to the land, like Janina said, but also, into the inner realms and the work that needs doing there, as well as in the physical realms. So my inner mindset, my inner reset, as well as tending the physical land as well. It's a reminder we mustn't forget to tend ourselves, because it can be very easy when you've got land too, because you're physically active, looking after the sheep, looking after this, doing this. I've got weeds that are knee high, but it's important to tend the self and the inner journey, as well as the physical aspect as well.
It's true. There's a lot of psychology into it for all of us tending the land and tending each other, because you can be very easily depressed. There's a lot of farmers, and when I had lived in another community, the farm wives who worked very hard, but there was a sense of isolation, and depression was a real deal. It was quite a thing. So that's another aspect of the Druidry that I've really enjoyed, is the psychology. There's so many people are psychologists and social workers like yourself, Jane, and Eimear, helping so many people in so many ways. And if we can all continue nurturing that community, and connecting to each other in the nature, I think. I mean, it's a special. I was asked at breakfast this morning by our friends from Vancouver if I thought that the world was in a sort of a different stage. And I thought, oh boy, that is a bigger communication than I can think of even answering adequately. But yeah, I think that taking care of self within this, despite how wonderful, despite how beautiful, despite the connection with the animals, is a huge piece. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's time to end, but we're going to have some more music, I hope. But this is just a comment from Sean. Wait a second, not that one. This one. I mean, no, that's the wrong one. This one. Sorry, Sean, you're too many comments. That's not a criticism. The diversity of humanity and diversity of nature reflect each other, and I think care and communion with the one or lack thereof has an effect on the other.
Mm.
And when people ask me what's druidry, it's a path where we look into the landscape and the seasons as a metaphor for our lives. So my metaphors are different to yours because I live in a different landscape to you, but that tending to our inner world, which is very, very important, our inner grove, and paying attention to what's outside. And when those two come together, then there's more harmony and balance and sync in our lives. And we all do that differently depending on where we are. And I think it's really, really important. And then you have the spirits of the place and you have the ancestors of the place and all of that, and our own ancestors and how we co-create that can be really, really healing. So could we have some more music, please, before we end our chat? It's been really, really enjoyable.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. And you're both, again, so very, very welcome to come on back. And people listening, especially if you're in Canada, makes it a little easier. But do keep in touch. I'm Swan One on the Hearth. If people connect, and I'm happy to chatter some more. Didn't know what I would talk about for an hour or so.
Maybe
Sorry?
because I didn't get to put to share the photographs, maybe you could put those up on the hearth. Your soy sheep. I just think they're incredible.
I can
And your
try. Sure, yeah.
your Icelandic chicken. So
Well, I sent you too many to start with, and there was just transmission troubles, technology, but that's okay. I could put some
I'm
up.
disappointed.
So this is
Go on.
yeah. So this is a different flute. There we go. I've been fortunate to have the I can do another flute making workshop, Sean. We certainly can do that. Thank you, Gabriella. That's lovely. Appreciate it. So this is a flute that I got from Magnar Storbecken. He's from Norway, and he created a lot of my instruments for me for the Norse historical flute journey. The lyre, and flutes and shakers and things. So this is an overtone flute, similar to the one that I used in ceremony. This part is birch, this is rowan, and the rest of it, I believe, is elder, as what I'm told, but it's very straight. And so it comes when I'm tamping it at the end. It's acting like the bend that you do in a penny whistle or tin whistle, and it's blowing out of the one hole on the top. And so I'll try and be a little bit of the haunting bit, and then I'll go back to my my swan flute. And then bid adieu. Will that be?
No, we'll talk afterwards.
Pardon?
We will talk afterwards when we go offline. So don't go anywhere. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And I'll end with the walnut. Oh, no, the swan. The swan. With the Valkyrie. There she is. Once again. So thank you, one and all.
That is just
Thank you, everyone.
so beautiful. So I'll just allow you to say goodnight. Or sorry, this is really strange for me. I'm doing this in the daytime. Normally I'm at night. So I'll let you say goodbye, should I say, to our viewers, and then we can chat later. We can look at the comments. Janina, do you want to say goodbye? But you can't hear me. Okay. So I will send her. Okay, so she can't hear me. I don't think so. No. Anyway. Listen, thank you all for joining me today. And I wish you all, now I'm going to wish you, normally it's a good night, but a good afternoon, a good night, good morning. And if you're watching a recording of this chat. So it's so lovely to, I mean, Janina is an absolute genius at her music and a very, very interesting story. And thanks to Jane. Jane, you can say goodbye too.
I was stepping off screen there. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. It's wonderful. We had a wonderful camp, so thank you to everyone that came to the camp and co-created the magic we had there, and to Gina for her amazing flute playing.
Okay, so until we meet again, Slán a go fóill. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Bye.